Underdog upsets, critical comebacks, last second miracles, the chance to cement your name in history, a $1 billion cash prize. That's right, it's March Madness. Every year at the end of the college basketball season, a committee gets together and picks the 64 best Division I teams across the nation to compete in a single elimination tournament until there is only one team left. People from all over the world compete in a bracket challenge in order to make the elusive perfect bracket. This has never been accomplished in the history of the tournament, and most likely it will not, because the odds of predicting 63 straight games correctly are 1 in 10.8 quintillion. Now, while making the perfect bracket and getting the $1 billion cash prize doesn't sound so likely, Warren Buffett has recently revamped the contest, announcing that the top 20 imperfect brackets would also receive $100,000 each.
Our goal for this project was to use games from past tournaments to try to predict the outcomes of future games and see if we could make all the uncertainty in March Madness just a little more certain.
For the data collection part of the project, using sports reference and other resources like this, we grabbed data for each team that made the tournament from the years 2000 to 2021, excluding 2020 because the tournament was canceled that year due to the pandemic. We decided to grab 23 variables for each team, but because each row in the data set is a game, there ends up being 2 teams or 46 variables in each row. Instead of debating whether or not we should keep both if only one variable is significant, we made the decision to combine A and B stats by taking the difference of them. Instead of having separate variables, A assists and B assists, for example, we created a variable called difference of assists, which is A's average assists subtracted by B's average assists. And we did this for each A and B variable. For our models, we decided to predict the margin of victory for Team A, the higher ranked team, instead of the probability of Team A winning, because we felt like there was a difference between a 3-point win and a 20-point win.
Using every single tournament game from 2000 to 2021, we ended up fitting 5 different models. For the first model, we minimized Aikiki's information criterion, also known as just AIC, which is a popular method for model selection. In general, the model with the smallest AIC score is considered to be the quote-unquote best model. This plot shows us 23 potential models and their respective AIC scores, and as we can see, the model with 8 predictors is the one that minimizes the AIC. To figure out what those 8 most significant variables are, we used a rake subsets function from the Leaps package in R, which tests every single possible combination of variables. And it turns out the difference in assists, steals, personal fouls, points per game, opponents' points per game, win-loss percentage, strength of schedule, and pace are the most significant variables. This image right here is our summary output for our model. The estimate column contains the coefficients for each of the different variables, and the last column is the p-values, which determine significance. The second model we fit by maximizing the adjusted R-squared, which is another popular method. Looking again at 23 different potential models, as we can see in this plot, the model with 13 parameters is the one that maximizes adjusted R-squared. Now that's 13 parameters, so that's 12 predictor variables and a y-intercept. The 8 variables that were in the AIC model were all also included in this model. All this did was add on 4 more variables: free throw percentage, defensive rating, offensive rating, and win percentage in the last 10 games. According to the p-values, none of these 4 new variables are significant. Now up to this point, our models have been predicting margin of victory for Team A, like how much will the higher ranked team win by. We decided we also wanted to try to fit a model that predicts the probability of Team A winning, and that's this model, the logistic model. To figure out what predictors to include in the logistic model, we ended up minimizing AIC again, and as you can see in the plot, the model with 6 predictors minimized AIC in this case. Those 6 predictors ended up being the difference in assists, steals, personal fouls, win-loss percentage, strength of schedule, and offensive rating. We also ended up fitting 2 other models to predict margin of victory. The first was what we called a no-intercept model, which is the exact same as our AIC model, but without a y-intercept. We did this because currently the y-intercept in the AIC model is a negative number, which means that in an even matchup, it actually favors the lower-ranked team. So we figured if we got rid of it, which is effectively just setting it to 0, that would put both teams on like an even playing field. And the last model we made was a model with only a y-intercept. The intercept ended up being about +7, which basically means that if you use the only intercept model, you just always pick the higher ranked team to win by 7 points. So this model is really equivalent to auto-filling a bracket, or just picking the higher ranked team every single time. So it's probably time we take a look at how well each of these models actually does at predicting March Madness games. This table shows how accurate each model was in various different situations. We wanted to see how well our models did predicting every single game from 2000 to 2021, and then how well they did in 2022, 2021, and 2014, and then we also wanted to see how often they predict upsets correctly. One important thing to note is that all of the columns that have an asterisk that say % correct, those are the percentage of games right given that every matchup has been determined. So that's the percentage on like a per game basis, if you decided who would win like right before each game started. The bracket percentage is how well a model would do if you actually filled out a bracket with it.
After coming up with our models, we used 2022 to test our models and see how well they would do against this past year's tournament. For each model, the % correct given that each game happened was, for the AIC, 61.9%. For the logistic model, 63.49%, and for the only intercept model, it was 66.67% correct. In an actual bracket setting, the percentages for the AIC, logistic, and only intercept model would have been 50.8%, 52.4%, and 57.1% respectively. This shows that the only intercept model, or picking the higher ranked team every time, would have done better than the AIC and logistic models we created. When we have things such as St. Peter's getting all the way to the Elite 8 as a 15 seed, Miami, Florida getting to the Elite 8 as a 10 seed, 3 of the 4 highest ranked teams losing before the end of the 4th round, and North Carolina as an 8 seed getting all the way to the championship, it makes 2022 a very hard year to predict. This doesn't look good for the models we chose. However, we decided to take out the years 2021 and 2014 and test our models against each of those years, and the results from testing these 2 years versus 2022 were significantly better.
We chose 2021 as an example because in terms of upsets, it sits at the middle of the pack with 20. However, the number of double-digit upsets was the highest at 15. In 2021, we saw that our AIC model predicted 75.8% of the games correctly. We correctly chose Baylor as the champion, and we had 3 out of the final 4 correctly chosen as well. This is also similar in the log model, which had 74.2% correct rate, which is slightly lower and 1 game less. And the no intercept model, which chooses seeds based on the higher seed, chose Gonzaga rather than Baylor and had a 69.4% correct rate. This was a total of 4 games less than the AIC model and was close to 7% less accurate in general. We chose 2014 because it was similar to 2021. However, we noticed that there were instances where we predicted some pretty large upsets. One such case was when the 7 seed UConn made it to the Final Four. We were only accurately able to predict this happening in 2 of our models, which was the AIC and the log. In every other model, they had the 1 seed Virginia winning.
Those predictions were all based on individual years, but we also wanted to get an idea of how well the models are doing overall. To do this, we ended up testing each of the models' predictive ability on every game from 2000 to 2021. The logistic model ended up predicting about 78% of these games correctly, and the AIC model came in a little lower at about 77%. Now, it should be noted that these percentages, they're probably a little too optimistic because we're predicting the games that we used to fit these models. We also wanted to see how well each model predicted upsets, where we define an upset as the lower ranked team winning. We looked at every single upset from 2000 to 2021, and the logistic model actually predicts a little over half of all upsets correctly. The AIC model had the second highest accuracy for upsets, but it came in at about 38.5%, so quite a bit lower than the logistic. And again, it probably should be noted that these are a little too optimistic for the same reasons stated earlier. Now, at this point, we've pretty much determined that the AIC and logistic models are the 2 best. And this leads us to the question that you've most likely all been waiting for. Which model do I use to fill out my bracket? Now, unfortunately, the answer is not just as simple as use this model. What we recommend is using a combination of the models, which allows you to see if the models are contradicting each other or backing each other up. You can even get some insight into what teams to look out for as potential upsets. For instance, with the 5-seed Tennessee versus 12-seed Oregon State game in 2021, which Oregon State did end up winning, the logistic model predicted that they would win, while the AIC and the rest of the margin of victory models all predicted Tennessee to win by around 1-3. Instead of just blindly trusting the logistic model, you can use the other predictions as an indication of sorts that the game is going to be close. The final score of most 5 and 12 seed matchups is not predicted to be within so few points. So even though the models predicted Tennessee to win, they showed it would be close. So you can take that as a good indication that you should maybe consider choosing Oregon State in that matchup. And this does bring us to a crucial point. Our models are not golden standards. You probably shouldn't rely solely on our models to make decisions for you. They do well, but they should be used more as suggestions to give advice as you make your picks. Your intuition and gut feelings, they're still really useful. Our models are more like complements for those. If you want to experiment with our models and predict March Madness games yourself, there's a zip file in the description of this video that has the Excel file we used to do this, and it does have a lot of other files too, like the code we used to create the models, our data sets, things like that. So if you want to check that out, there should be a link to it in the description. Additionally, there's a written report for this whole project that goes into more detail on a lot of these concepts, as well as goes into a couple things that we didn't get to in this video. So if you want to look at that, there will be a link to that in the description as well.